Welcome back to the Mariendal 250, the penultimate round of the Inland Off-Road Championship, where we continue our climb through the starting order, the guys that did the best runs through the 50-kilometer prologue. Werner Kennedy and Jaco Delport from Lesotho have been out of racing action for a full 2 seasons now. Werner, an ex-off-road motorcycle racer and previous Northern Regions off-road car champion, knows only one speed though, and that's fast and flat out as always. The beautiful looking and awesome sounding Porter had some problems on the qualifying prologue, as to be expected with a 2-year layoff, but they were just simply happy at this point to be back racing and behind the wheels of off-road racing cars. Historically, they do get faster as the day gets longer, so we'll be watching for them to come good in the main event later on in the day. Challenges for an overall national title in the past, they definitely carried some form. Then it was on to the current Class D leaders, Stompie Meinhardt and Adrian Roots in the Star Lubricants Caltex Delo Cruiser, who had, up until this point, had a fairy tale season. Together, as a pairing for the first time from the beginning of the year, they've won every single race in their class so far and have always been setting the pace and the benchmark. This time around, however, a prop shaft was their undoing. It managed to grind a hole in the engine sump, and about 40 kilometers into a 50-kilometer prologue, they had to stop due to the engine losing literally all of its oil, every single last drop. A sad end to their day's expectations, but still leading Class D Championship, albeit now by a smaller margin than they were hoping for. 2019 and defending Class D Drivers Champion Lawrence van Wyk, now alongside navigator Peter Visser, are also one of the crews with a not-so-great 2020 season so far under their belts. No real issues reported in qualifying this time around until, with about 10 kilometers to go, a steering part became damaged. They could limp it into the finish though, and they would need to spend plenty of time in the DSP to effect urgent repairs before they went ahead into the main race. Tense times coming in from a short prologue with a very short time as well to get the car prepped and race ready before the main event. Nervous times for the champs once again in 2020. Having notched up a string of second places the whole season so far in Class D, Tians de Toy and James O Mahoney must be wondering what they have to do to win a race in the Propeller Center Toyota Land Cruiser. An uneventful prologue, which is probably what they were looking for, saw them qualify in 3rd place for the class. That's Class D. Not ideal really in their quest for that elusive first win, but not totally out of the running either. Having to come from behind is always difficult and tricky in the dust, so they'd be praying for the rain that was touted to be arriving in the afternoon to land earlier rather than later. But rest assured, they were going to drive their hearts out come the main race. One crew that, with so many second places under their belt, are now more than desperate to get that first win and get that monkey off their back. First time out in one of the big bangers, Naldo Pieterse and navigator Werner Vis made the switch from side-by-sides up to Class A, as we were expecting them to do as well, after having bought a Zarco. Having only spent a few short stints testing and getting used to the car, Naldo was notably quite nervous for the race ahead. The difference between what he was used to in the Zarco is rather huge, going from a side-by-side point and shoot with no gear changes to a fully active suspension, as well as gearbox to deal with, and much more power. But Naldo is no stranger to speed, and they had a good qualifying run until they also experienced throttle cable issues, just getting jammed up, which set them back a good 13 minutes or so. Qualifying down on time and in 4th place in class was to be taken with a pinch of salt, as they would no doubt be charging hard come the main race, and also developing within the car and the cockpit to get more comfortable with the machine as the kilometers tick by. Steady as always and consistent as ever, the father and son pairing of Tony and Mike Cavea were looking for more of the same as their last two outings since rejoining the fray earlier this season. Their Bat Spec Zero was immaculately prepped as always and looking good and fast, staying out of trouble. With only the odd wrong slot costing them precious time in the prologue, they brought the car back, importantly, in one piece. No repairs to be done, and they were prepped and ready for the main race. Tony and Michael are really enjoying being back in the Bat after spending a few successful seasons in the CRT, also racing in the Class Ps, but with much less power. The Bat ran a Lexus 4-litre V8 engine previously, but they've switched across to the Nissan 3.5-litre V6, which was Tony's choice, and it made him much more happy as he gets the power down a little bit earlier, a little bit sharper than he did in the bigger V8. Also that sound. Ooh, that sound. Back for more, and hopefully not punishment this time. Francois van der Waals and Gerry Prinsloo in the D33 KD Civils Toyota Hilux, setting off fast as always, right from the get-go, was something to behold. This team always gives it their all. There's no middle ground here, it's all or nothing. But unfortunately, the Hilux decided differently. The Hilux decided nothing this time. And it was the gearbox that simply ran out of gears. When they eventually were reduced to only second gear, they had no option to withdraw and were added to the growing list of early non-finishers. Johan Besson and the D20 had alongside him a navigator none other than Henry Kerner, Ernst Roberts' regular navigator. With Ernst missing out on this race due to other commitments, and with Johan needing a navigator, it only made sense, and would also aid Henry's championship aspirations to try and be the #1 navigator in the regionals. The team took a while to get settled, as was to be expected having not raced together before. However, about 15 kilometers in, they gelled, and they were on course for a good showing. Johan was getting to grips very nicely with the Bash Auto Toyota Hilux after making the switch from Class E up to Class D earlier this season. Henry kept them pointed in the right direction as always, and they were rewarded with a qualifying time which placed them 4th overall and 1st in Class D, surely more than they could have hoped for. It was game on, and for the rest of the day, everyone else was going to have to play catch-up. As a new pairing on the tour, and also showing that they got faster with each kilometer, it wasn't off the cards that they could well trouble a top 3 overall come the main race later on in the day. The very enthusiastic and ever-friendly crew of Sean Kruger and Johan Becker was back for the second time this season in the aging Jimco. This car has a rich history in the South Africa off-road racing scene, achieving great success in the national championships back in the day. Since buying the car last year, the crew have spent time getting it up to scratch, and slowly but surely we're starting to get there as well. It was starting to feel once again like a race vehicle that could win. And what they lack in experience, they more than make up for in enthusiasm. Even the odd driver's mistake here and there, and the odd navigational error as well, couldn't dampen their spirits. They still have the biggest smiles on their faces, the crew of Kruger and Becker, every time they come a-racing. So much so, you can almost see it through their helmets. The end few kilometers of the prologue were probably the areas on the course where you could really stretch the legs of the cars and get some kind of feel of how the motor was running. But it did look like the course was going to tighten up and get much more tech and testing for the afternoon's main event. Checking out how things were looking for the E5 crew, what a perfect season Johan Visser and Jerry Besson in their E5 Hilux have had to date. The statistics read 4 starts, 4 Class E wins, top of Class E championship, and leading the overall production vehicle championship as well. Those are some good numbers. They've managed to find the perfect balance between speed and reliability, and not to jinx them, but at the end of each race so far, the Bucky looked so good that it basically looked as if you could just wash it, refuel it, and load it up again to go racing. Claiming first place in Class E during this qualifying again put them on track for yet another great showing, also showing the importance of getting the setup and everything dialed in for the prologue to make a good result in the main race a mere formality. Well, that's how they make it look anyway. Another crew with a 100% finishing record was that of father and son team Aki and Jean in their Class F Toyota Hilux. Good preparation and steady driving has proven to be their recipe for success this season. They keep pushing their aging petrol-powered Hilux to the limit, and as such have also already clinched the Class F championship, and that with 1 round remaining. Never letting up though, they put in yet another great performance in the prologue, ending up first for Class F and looking to retain that position come the main race. They'd have their elbows out, and they wouldn't want too many people to try and make the passes come the main event. Bang per buck, Class F in production vehicles is still got to be the most fun, bone-rattling you can have in off-road racing. For the Isuzu fans out there, Benerick Botma and his brother Pierce, as event sponsors, decided to put their mouths where their money was in the BTS grain handling E12 Isuzu Bucky. Having recently brought the Bucky, they spent a bit of time rebuilding it and getting it up to their spec level. The very neatly turned out Isuzu of the Kroonstad businessman had the added pressure of having to perform well in their home race. All eyes from the Kroonstad community were on them. But also, being naturally competitive, they were certainly not going to let anyone down. Losing front-wheel drive shortly after the start of the qualifying run due to a broken drive shaft put them on the back foot, but they still managed to qualify third in class, giving us some promises of what we could expect from the crew later on in the day. With the spanners out and ready to try and get them back into four-wheel drive, the prologue ended, but the race really was in the DSP to get the big Isuzu prepped for the big show. The qualifying prologue was not one for Wayne Smith and Hendrik Ruud to remember this time around. A broken drive shaft early on, which in turn damaged the brake pipes, so it really was all to be done in the DSP on the spanners and the main race. Hopefully everything held together. For the F24, a few electrical issues picked up in the qualifying prologue by TG Janse van Rensburg and SW Conradi was dealt with in the service park before the start of the main event. Only joining the championship a race ago, the team is still finding their feet and getting used to the power coming out of the Lexus V8 under the hood of the Toyota Hilux. F denoting the age of the vehicle, but a slightly younger engine in there as well. For the B1 pairing of Crocher and Van Skalkwyk, they broke down very early to the start, meaning they were going to be starting way down the order. And then for the E26 crew of Suisse Moret and Jacques Leroux, they had a good qualifying run in their Toyota Hilux. No real problems reported, and the crew seemed to be getting better with each event, but they missed out on the top step in Class E by a mere 29 seconds. Agonizingly close. Could they finally take the fight to Johan Vierse and Jerry Besson, who have dominated the category to date? Suisse definitely knows this kind of terrain and would be hoping that the wagon would simply play the game for the day and bring the E26 all the way to the top. In the B class, for once, the family rivalry did not come to fruition between the guys and the girls, and the B1 and B2 for the category. The girls broke down on the qualifying loop and were out of contention very early on. That left Sifi van Skalkwijk and Arthur Crocher to fly the flag for the families in their B2 Marco. No problems on the prologue for them, so alles was mooi, and they were simply placed nicely come the main event, trying to stay out of trouble and keep those elbows tucked in nice and tight. Suleiman and Ahmed Hussein were hoping for a good outing in their immaculately turned out Class B vehicle. Very eager to do well, this was their first appearance of the 2020 season. And long may they stay with us, looking forward to a solid full run in 2021. They had a few small issues in the qualifying prologue, but that was soon dealt with in the break between qualifying and the main race. Small turns of screws here and there, just to tighten things up, and they would be then good to go in the B46. The B class was not decided at this event just yet. With all crews home, this is how it broke down in the qualifying run and would also decide the starting order. The Mariendal 250 Prologue had Michael and Jean de Beer at the top of the pile in a G class ahead of Erasmus and Odendal, hometown heroes, with Werner and Leon Mostert making it 3 side-by-sides going 1, 2 and 3. The first of the production vehicles was Basson and Kerner. Glenn Turon and Craig Galvin in Bumblebee were looking to stay out of trouble. Same situation for Tony and Mike Cavea, who just managed to squeak into single digits, out-qualifying Dutoy and O Mahoney, who were desperate to get their win in the Ds. They qualified 10th. After prologue and before racing, we chatted to a couple of hopeful racers.
Hi, my name is Benedict. This is my brother Piers Botma. We are from BTS Grain Handling, main sponsor for the day. But also nice to have do the racing for us here. Yeah, the prologue was quite fast. It was a nice prologue, nice pieces in the stage. Can't wait for the main race.
We had an awesome prologue. This terrain is so nice, the tights and twisties for these side-by-sides. This is what we love, this is what we do, and I think all the side-by-sides should have had a good prologue session. We're looking forward going out the next loop, which is 108 kilometers, and we just want to say thank you to the organizers for organizing such a great event for us.
We continue our coverage after the break.